Imagine a town draped in darkness. Ravensbrook, they called it. Not just any darkness, but the kind that sinks its teeth into your bones, the kind that makes every shadow seem alive. The air itself was a weapon that night, sharp and frigid. It bit at exposed skin, a constant reminder of the cold that seeped into everything. The residents of Ravensbrook knew this cold. It was the kind of cold that drove folks indoors, sealing them away behind thick walls and shuttered windows. It was a night for huddling around hearths, flames casting flickering shadows that danced with the fears of those gathered close. But fear, like the cold, has a way of seeping in through the smallest cracks. Ravensbrook held secrets, whispered stories passed down through generations, tales told with wide eyes and hushed voices. They spoke of a night, much like this one, when the darkness deepened, a night when the cold held a different kind of bite. The elders would speak of a presence, something unnatural that haunted the darkest hours. They warned of shadows that moved with a purpose and of sounds that chilled the very marrow. Most dismissed these tales as folklore, the ramblings of old minds seeking solace in superstition. But some, those who remembered the stories a little too vividly, felt a shiver of unease as the church bell tolled, marking the stroke of midnight. Midnight in Ravensbrook, the witching hour, a time when the veil between worlds thinned and the impossible threatened to bleed into reality. The silence of the night, already heavy, deepened. It pressed in on the town, a suffocating blanket of anticipation. Unseen by those huddled inside their homes, a wind picked up, swirling through the empty streets. It carried with it a faint, rhythmic sound, a sound easily dismissed had anyone been foolish enough to be out in the elements. But this was no ordinary wind, and the sound it carried was no mere trick of the ear. It was the sound of approaching dread, the sound of Ravensbrook's dark secret riding hard on the back of the midnight wind. The rhythmic clatter grew louder. It echoed off the frost-covered buildings, a haunting drumbeat in the silence. It was a sound that spoke of power, of untamed energy, slicing through the stillness of the night. Each hoofbeat was a hammer blow to the heart, a stark reminder that something was coming. From the furthest edge of Ravensbrook, where the houses gave way to the endless expanse of the moor, it emerged. A shape in the darkness, at first indistinct, like a figment of the swirling snow. But it solidified quickly, taking on a terrifying form. A horse, its coat as black as night, muscles rippling beneath its skin as it thundered down the cobblestone street. Section 2. The Black Rider emerges. The horse was a creature of nightmares. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, two crimson embers that pierced the darkness. Its breath rose from its nostrils in great ghostly plumes, vanishing as quickly as they formed in the frigid air. But it was the rider that truly stole the breath from your lungs. He sat tall in the saddle, a figure cloaked in shadows. A wide-brimmed hat, black as pitch, concealed his features, leaving only the unsettling glow of his eyes visible beneath. His attire was that of a bygone era, a long, flowing coat that billowed out behind him like a funeral shroud. He rode with an eerie stillness, a stark contrast to the raw power of the beast beneath him. Section 3. Fear in the Frost. The few flickering lights that dared to challenge the darkness of Ravensbrook were not enough to penetrate the gloom that clung to the rider. His presence seemed to swallow the light, leaving only a void where he passed. Behind shuttered windows, hearts pounded in unison with the horse's hooves. Fear, sharp and cold as ice, gripped the town. Whispers died in throats, replaced by gasps of terror. Children burrowed deeper under blankets, their small bodies trembling. Parents, their faces pale and drawn, could only hold their loved ones close, praying that whatever evil rode the night would pass them by. A specter of midnight. The horse and rider made no sound save for the relentless drumming of hooves against stone. They were a phantom spectacle, a chilling tableau that unfolded before terrified onlookers. At the crossroads, the horse stopped abruptly. Then, with a snort, the horse wheeled around, vanishing into the shadows. The echo of hooves faded into the distance, leaving an unnerving silence in its wake. Inside their homes, the townsfolk of Ravensbrook held their breath. Each creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind against their windows, sent shivers down their spines. Fear, potent and contagious, spread through the town like a plague. Whispers, hushed and urgent, escaped from behind barred doors. "What was that? Did you see it?" Questions hung in the air, unanswered, unanswerable. The elders, their faces etched with a lifetime of weathered wisdom, muttered about ancient tales, stories of restless spirits and vengeful beings, long forgotten, now resurrected in the heart of the night. The weight of unspoken dread settled over Ravensbrook. It clung to the rafters of their homes, seeped into the very mortar that held the bricks together. The once familiar streets, now shrouded in darkness and unsettling silence, seemed to pulsate with a life of their own. Sleep that night was a distant dream for the residents of Ravensbrook. They lay awake in their beds, listening, waiting, dreading the sound of hooves against cobblestone. Every gust of wind that rattled their shutters sounded like the spectral steed returning, hungry for more than just their fear. The children, their imaginations fueled by the terror that permeated the air, whispered to each other under the covers. The stories they shared, a bizarre mix of folklore and their own heightened fears, painted a vivid picture of the night rider. He was a specter, they said, a harbinger of death, come to collect the souls of the wicked. His eyes, they swore, burned with the fires of hell itself, capable of seeing into the darkest corners of their hearts. Their parents, desperate to shield them from the horrors of the night, tried to soothe their fears with reassurances, but even their voices trembled, betraying their own deep-seated unease. The night wore on, each hour an eternity. The clock on the town square, usually a comforting reminder of the passage of time, now seemed to tick away with malicious intent, counting down the minutes until the next unwelcome visitation. The specter of the midnight rider lingered in the shadows, a chilling reminder that some things once seen could never be unseen. The townsfolk of Ravensbrook, once a community bound by shared hopes and dreams, were now united by a primal fear, a shared terror that clung to them like the icy breath of the grave. The black horse, a creature of pure darkness, moved with an unsettling grace. It wasn't just the speed, though it moved like a phantom wind through the narrow lanes of Ravensbrook. It was the silence, the way it seemed to devour sound itself. The clatter of hooves, so thunderous before, was now muffled, as if the night itself conspired to hide its passage. Every so often, the horse would rear back on its hind legs, its silhouette stark against the backdrop of the moon. The rider, shrouded in his dark cloak, would remain utterly still, a statue atop a living nightmare. Then, with a toss of its head and a snort that echoed like a death rattle, the horse would continue its ghostly gallop. Those unfortunate souls who dared to peek from behind their curtains felt a chill deeper than the biting frost. It was the eyes of the horse that truly instilled fear, two burning embers that seemed to bore into their very souls. They glowed with an unnatural light, a malevolent intelligence that belied the beast's earthly form. It was as if the horse were searching for something or someone. Its gaze swept over the windows of Ravensbrook, lingering for a moment on each one as if daring those inside to challenge its presence. And then, with a snort of disdain, it would move on, leaving a trail of icy dread in its wake. The town of Ravensbrook, once a place of warmth and laughter, was now a prisoner of its own fear. The streets, usually bustling with life even at this late hour, were deserted. Doors remained bolted shut, windows covered, as if the town itself were holding its breath, waiting for the nightmare to pass. But the horse and its rider seemed in no hurry. They moved with a deliberate slowness now, their presence a suffocating weight upon the town. It was a game of cat and mouse, the hunter relishing the terror of its prey. Each echoing hoofbeat was a tick of the clock, counting down the minutes until dawn, if dawn would even come. On and on the horse and rider rode, their movements taking on an almost hypnotic quality. The townsfolk, trapped in their homes, could only watch in horrified fascination as the spectacle unfolded beneath the pale light of the moon. It was a dance of despair, a macabre waltz between the living and the unknown. The horse, a creature of darkness and power, held the town captive with its very presence, and the rider, shrouded in shadow, remained an enigma, his motives as impenetrable as the night itself. Time in its relentless march seemed to both crawl and fly. The church bell, its tone usually a source of comfort, now echoed with the weight of doom. Each clang of the bell hammer was a nail hammered into the coffin of hope. And as the final resonation of the bell faded, the clock tower struck a new hour, the bewitching hour of 1. The air, already thick with fear, crackled with a new energy. It was palpable, a tangible shift in the atmosphere, as if the very fabric of reality were thinning, revealing the abyss beneath. The horse, sensing the change, stopped its restless pacing. It stood motionless in the center of the town square, its sides heaving, its breath forming clouds of frost in the freezing air. Then it happened. A sound so primal, so full of raw power, that it seemed to emanate from the depths of the earth itself. The horse threw back its head, its black mane whipping in the wind, and let loose a roar that shattered the silence of the night. It was a roar born of fire and brimstone, a sound that spoke of ancient power. Windows rattled in their frames, the very stones of Ravensbrook seemed to tremble. Children screamed, burying their faces in their mothers' skirts, while men felt a primal fear grip their hearts. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the roar ceased. Silence descended once more upon Ravensbrook, a silence heavier, more profound than before. The horse, its eyes still glowing with that malevolent light, lowered its head, its breath steaming in the frigid air. The rider, shrouded in shadow, remained an enigma, his reaction to the ear-splitting roar hidden from view. Then, with a speed that defied logic, they were gone. One moment they stood there, a terrifying tableau illuminated by the pale moonlight. The next, they had vanished. There was no fading into the shadows, no gradual disappearance. It was as if they had been erased from existence, leaving behind only the lingering echo of the roar and the stench of sulfur in the air. The silence stretched on, broken only by the pounding hearts of the terrified townsfolk. Minutes passed, Then hours, but the silence remained, a heavy blanket of dread smothering the town. The wind, which had whipped through the streets earlier, carrying the sound of approaching doom, now lay dormant, as if even the elements themselves were afraid to disturb the unsettling peace. Dawn, when it finally came, brought little comfort. The sky remained a bruised purple, the sun a pale ghost struggling to penetrate the gloom. The streets of Ravensbrook remained deserted, the doors bolted shut, as if the town itself were holding its breath, afraid of what might happen if it dared to exhale. Dawn broke over Ravensbrook, but the town remained cloaked in fear. The rising sun seemed powerless to penetrate the darkness. Streets were eerily deserted. Doors remained bolted shut, windows covered. Whispers replaced the sounds of trade and laughter. The townsfolk of Ravensbrook, once a community bound by the routines of daily life, now found themselves united by a shared sense of dread. They gathered in small groups, their voices hushed, their faces etched with fear and confusion. What had they witnessed? Was it a demon from the depths of hell, a restless spirit seeking vengeance, or some other worldly entity beyond human comprehension? The elders, their faces etched with a lifetime of weathered wisdom, could offer no answers. They searched their memories, sifting through ancient tales and half-forgotten legends, but found no solace in their lore. The midnight rider, with his fiery steed and chilling silence, defied explanation, a terrifying enigma that mocked their attempts to understand. As the days turned into nights, the fear in Ravensbrook refused to abate. The memory of the midnight rider, of his deafening roar and sudden disappearance, lingered in the air like a phantom limb, a constant reminder of their vulnerability. Sleep, once a sanctuary from the cares of the day, became a torturous ordeal, haunted by nightmares of hooves drumming against cobblestones and eyes burning with malevolent intent. The once familiar streets, now cloaked in an almost tangible sense of dread, were avoided after dark. The laughter of children, once a constant melody in the town, was silenced, replaced by a chilling silence that spoke volumes of their unspoken fears. The midnight rider, though gone, had left an indelible mark on Ravensbrook, a haunting legacy of fear and uncertainty. The terror that gripped Ravensbrook was more than just the fear of the unknown. It was the fear of the unseen, the fear that lurked in the shadows of their minds, whispering doubts and fueling suspicions. Neighbors, once bound by trust and camaraderie, now eyed each other with suspicion, their hearts poisoned by the fear that the rider might return, or worse, that he had never truly left. The bonds of community, already strained by the shared trauma, began to fray. Accusations were whispered, fingers pointed, and old grudges resurfaced with renewed vigor. The midnight rider had not only shattered the peace of Ravensbrook, but had sown the seeds of discord, leaving the townsfolk to grapple not only with their fear, but with the erosion of their own humanity. Life in Ravensbrook stumbled onward. The blacksmith's hammer rang out, a tentative counterpoint to the lingering silence. The baker's oven filled the streets with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Children returned to their games, their imaginations haunted by the midnight rider. The memory of that night lingered in the heart of the town. Tales of the black horse and its rider were whispered, each retelling adding dread to the legend. Life in Ravensbrook continued, but it was forever altered. The townsfolk now listened intently to the whispers of the wind, searching for any sign of their nocturnal visitor. Shadows held a sinister quality, their movements scrutinized for any hint of the rider's passing. On windy nights, the townsfolk lay awake, hearts pounding with the imagined rhythm of hooves. The Midnight Rider, though gone, had left an indelible mark on Ravensbrook. He had awakened an ancient fear, exposing the fragility of their existence. The experience changed them, leaving them forever marked. The children grew up haunted by the specter of the Midnight Rider. The adults carried the fear, their laughter tinged with a nervous edge. The legend lived on, a haunting reminder that darkness never truly disappears.